It's good to be in something from the ground floor. I came too late for that. I know. But lately, I'm getting the feeling that I came in at the end. The best is over.
What showrunner David Chase did with arguably the best show ever made was to squeeze all the juice left in the gangster genre. Like Tony, he came in at the end. While there have certainly been gangster films since this vital part of American cinema, these days they are represented by the likes of Gangster Squad, Live by Night, or Capone. Does it smell like a dead genre? To put it simply, there are 3 stages in the evolution of a genre. In the first, the visual and narrative conventions are established to create a set of expectations for the audience. You saw that in part 1. Then we have the golden age. Filmmakers make the most of the established style and tropes, creating the classics that range from Little Caesar to The Big Boss. The final phase is the downfall. Everything's been said, so the films comment on what's been said before.
Hey, Bud, you in the audience. Where do you think you're going?
Well, Mr. Killer, this is where I came in.
Well, you sit right back down there till this thing's over, see?
That's The Sopranos. That's Casino. That's Goodfellas with a protagonist that doesn't really like violence.
Pay me my money. Sorry, baby. Okay.
The peak of this later stage was The Sopranos. But as good as the show was, it's still very much indebted to the traditions of the genre. In the first episode, Christopher Moltisanti shoots this poor patsy. The edit likens him to mob movie heroes: Humphrey Bogart, Dean Martin, Edward G. Robinson. That's how he sees himself. But his medium shot pulls us back. He's a butcher, acting out what he saw in the movies. It's one of the many brilliant exercises in deconstruction we can find in the show. Yet they all still work as homage.
I know a man who made an anti-war movie. A good one. When it was shown in his hometown, army enlistment went up 600%.
You can't make an anti-war film.
You fucking been psycho!
You can't make an anti-gangster film either. However deconstructionist Goodfellas was, it was still jolly good fun. Chances are, you'll all but forgotten Henry's sad sack conclusion. But that energy-fueled intro is still on everyone's mind.
It's like a mafia movie. As far back as I can remember, I always wanted to be in a mafia movie. Cool.
The only way to take the genre one step further would be with a clean break. And that's what Martin Scorsese did with The Irishman. The film denies the single pleasures associated with the gangster genre. We're talking about trademarks like the rat trope, which has survived a century.
I never knew no Godfather.
Never rat on your friends, and always keep your mouth shut.
Scorsese has used this trope throughout his career in very subtle ways. At the end of The Departed, you'll notice a large rodent crossing the frame. If you are intricately familiar with the gangster genre, you will know that that rat is a reference to an informant that betrays the mob's code of silence. The Irishman, on the other hand, showed just how insidious that code can be by bringing up the late Jimmy Hoffa's family.
They're here, and they gotta live not knowing. That's hard to do.
We're talking about Camerawork. The smooth tracking shot in the Copacabana sequence is reframed in an old people's home. The camera is now jolting and aimless. In Goodfellas, we start by following the hero as the world bends at his feet.
He says Jimmy Blue Eyes and Maya Lansky.
We arrive at Frank Sheeran as he recounts sad tales of a sad past. Was it worth it in the end? Did our mobster get a pink Cadillac? better company. The best wallpaper money can buy.
No. Don't need it.
Sure?
Yeah.
Our protagonist isn't interested in any of that, so we can hardly live vicariously through him. He isn't a kid seduced by the mafia. Most importantly, Frank Sheeran has none of the charisma of Tony, not even Tony.
We love Tony Soprano, and what a great guy, and he's so funny, and they're all so funny. And they do intimidate, brutalize, and murder people.
Like David Chase kindly reminds us, the gangster is likable. That's what makes you tune in. But not this gangster. The Irishman destroys the three pillars of the mafia film. First, there's the Complicit Family. In Goodfellas, Karen lusts after money and drugs, as does Ginger in Casino. Carmela knows better.
I have forsaken what is right for what is easy.
Her superior understanding doesn't really stop her from being an accomplice. A mobster always needs one. When Frank brings home blood money for the first time, the camera swirls from the cash to his face, but poignantly, it lands on the family. That's the last time we see Mary Sheeran. She left, and her children eventually left as well. Families are no longer accomplices or enablers. Second, the role of the church. The final tracking shot follows the nurse into the bustling life of the hospital and drifts back to the stillness of the night. Like many Scorsese's characters before, Frank is grasping for salvation.
His mercy endures forever.
The birth from a lighted match increased 1,000,000 times. Infinite. No, you don't fuck around with the infinite. There's no way you do that.
Charlie's battle with his inner demons is compelling, which ultimately makes him a fascinating character. Our Irish gangster seems beyond absolution.
But you don't feel anything at all? Well, water under the dam.
Religion is no longer the mobster's last refuge. Third, there's a jolt of energy when violence happens in mob films.
Hello, Louis.
It certainly evolved from the stylized baptism montage in The Godfather. It turned into the more brutal, up-and-close stabbings and beatings of Scorsese's work. These lack some of the finesse, but they are just as exciting.
How the fuck am I funny? What the fuck is so funny about me? Tell me. Tell me what's funny.
Even when violence is denied, it is like a bomb waiting to go off.
Get the fuck out of here, Tommy.
You motherfucker! I almost had him!
Hey, what are you doing with that?
On paper, this is a very similar scene.
You really believe in that bullshit league?
Well, it's not bad. It's a tag.
Joe.
You barely feel the threat of violence. This is completely matter of fact.
Now, for something like this, you're gonna need 2 guns.
Joseph Crazy Joe Gallo had come to
Violence is no fun anymore. And when it happens, the audience is left to reckon with all of its implications. Scorsese shows death as unglamorous and unceremonious, or reserved for old men slowly approaching the grave.
There's action only if there is danger. This was said by Howard Hawks, who was an authority on both the Western and the gangster film. To stay alive or die, this is our greatest drama.
At 77, Scorsese isn't getting any younger.
So,
I imagine once he was uncritically excited by the triumphs of the movie Gangster. But with death looming larger on the horizon, he's reevaluating his role in its development, just like another aging man before him. Clint Eastwood's Unforgiven arguably killed the Western film.
You don't look like no rootin', tootin' son of a bitch and cold-blooded assassin.
Both films share an unwillingness to glamorize violence and to mythologize anti-heroes. They finally refused to print the legend, and instead, they looked for the raw truth at the center of a genre they helped to build. There were other westerns after Unforgiven, and other gangster films will come after The Irishman, but I suspect both genres have seen their final masterpiece.